Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 4 of our 5-part Unstable full set review, where today we're looking at the faction Goblin Explosioneers. That's going to include all of the cards with the Goblin Explosioneers watermark, as well as all of the red cards that have no watermarks. That's what will be included in this video. Now, if you've been watching the series, you kind of know what to expect here. This is a little unusual, not like our normal set reviews. We are looking at things not in color pie order, but faction order. And secondly, we are going to look at the cards individually, talk about their implications for limited purposes, draft and sealed. But also, too, there's a lot of good multiplayer cards that are involved in this set, and it does feel like they're trying to tap into an idea of maybe some silver-bordered commander play. And some play groups, even though it's technically not legal, do allow for some silver-bordered cards, so I'll point those out when we come across them, too. Quickly before we get started, though, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to support what we do here. Patreon's down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon as well as Flipside Gaming. Any purchases there, Unstable or anything, we get a small percentage. So thank you in advance, and hopefully you can save some cash, find a deal there. With that being said, let's get into it. Box of free-range goblins. Good place to start. Okay, so this card is a high variance card, and if you've been watching the set review, probably not too surprising, because there's a lot of dice rolling, a lot of high variance going on in this set, because it's an unset. It's meant to be randomized fun some of the time. And red being the color of high variance just normally in the color pie, you can imagine we're going to see a lot of dice rolling today. So this particular card is weird because tokens are good. I mean, 1/1 tokens on the battlefield are great. You're paying 6 for this. It's a common, so you kind of have to adjust expectations for power level. But think of it this way, where are you really getting value here? If I roll a 3 for 6, is that value? I don't know, probably not, quite honestly. Probably a 4 is where the value starts to kick in. If you roll a 6, then you get more than your money's worth out of the 6 mana, right? But it is high variance. The lower rolls are going to mean you're kind of throwing away some of your resources. But at the same time, that might not matter, and here's why. We've seen a lot of cards already. We're going to see some more going forward that manipulate dice rolls. So, or sometimes it's just simply dice matters, because rolling a dice could have effect on other cards. If you have those synergies, maybe you drafted that style of deck, then something like this will be great, because even if you get a low roll, it's not necessarily a drawback. So keep that in mind as we go through the cards. In a vacuum, this is hit or miss. I may or may not play it. If I'm going super wide and I care about every single token or creature I can get on the battlefield, then I might play it in a vacuum. If I have interactions with other dice roll cards, then I'll probably definitely play it. But other than that, there's times where you will skip this one. Garbage Elemental. This is an okay 5-drop. The Frenzy 2 is kind of cool. It actually hits as a 4/4 if it doesn't get blocked. If it does get blocked, though, it's only a 2/4. It can be blocked by 2 3s. It can be blocked by other 2 4s, stuff like that. So that's a little awkward. Sometimes this card's just going to sit around and not have a lot to do other than be defensive. It does have the extra ability. It can be blocked by wordy creatures, so that could come in handy by all means, especially in this set. There's a lot of heavy text going on a number of cards. So at times it'll be great. At times it's going to feel kind of pointless. So again, at 5, I don't know if I always run this. It depends on what my pool looks like. Goblin Haberdasher. Okay, this is actually a really streamlined, good limited card. 2/2 menace for 3. It's got me right there. Other creatures you control wearing hats in their art have menace? Well, that's what makes it an uncard. Okay, so that's actually pretty sweet. Mark Rosewater did go ahead and say that it does have to be a hat. It can't be like a cloak or something like that. So I guess that leaves some room for interpretation. But for the most part, I think it's pretty clear what's a hat. And you know what? If you have some other creatures that get menace, wonderful. Just even more of a power boost for this card. And if you don't, it's still fine on its own. Hammer Helper. Okay, this is a very good threat and effect, actually. It takes the creature for the turn like you would expect, but you also get to roll a 6-sided die, which is going to matter with some other cards occasionally. But even beyond that, it's going to pump the power of the creature till end of turn. So even if you just get a 1, for example, yeah, it's something you wouldn't have had normally, so why not? Really, for 4 mana, this feels really economical for a threat and effect. I'm happy to run this, and at common, you should see these floating around a draft. Hammer Jammer. Okay, when I was talking about cards that are looking for die rolls, this is an example of one. This one's pretty interesting. Costs 4, and you roll a 6-sided die. When this enters battlefield, then you'll get +1/+1 counters based on that roll. Now, whenever you roll a die, though, you remove those counters, and then you put that many +1/+1 counters on. So every time you roll a die, this will change. Couple things to point out. First off, it says whenever you roll a die, it doesn't have to be a 6-sided die at that point. So if you have Sword of Dungeons and Dragons and you roll a 20-sided die and hit a 20, you could put 20 +1/+1 counters on this thing until you roll the die again, right? Or a die again. So that could be kind of a sweet interaction, although that's a mythic. You won't see it all the time. But just keep that in mind. It does not have to be a 6-sided die. It's whenever you roll a die. Now, the card could be jumping around all over the place. And there's your high variance, right? Because there's times when you might have a decent-sized creature, but then you want to play another card with a die roll effect because it's going to help you keep going in the game, and then it gets rolled down to a 1 or something like that, right? Like, that could happen. There are cards as well, we saw a lot of them yesterday actually in black, that enhance die rolls. So if you have a synergy with some of those cards, this card maybe does get a little bit better. A lot of the cards we see today get a little bit better actually. So keep that in mind too. So there's a lot going on here. This is not a card I play necessarily just in a vacuum, but if I have a lot of effects and I'm comfortable that whenever I get a low roll, I'll be able to roll up at some point, yeah, maybe I play it. There's also instant effects and also triggered abilities that can allow you to roll a die on the fly, which means in the middle of combat, you might be able to roll a die and change the numbers. Again, it's variance. You don't know what you're going to get, but sometimes it'll be to your advantage. Maybe sometimes it won't be. So very interesting, but your opponent's got to be aware of those possibilities that this creature could become bigger on the fly. Hammerfest Boomtacular. Okay, so this is a enchantment for 5 that does absolutely nothing on its own. And you know how I feel about things like that normally. Not a big fan. But I will say this, the art is amazing. I just love this, the whole concept of this card. And I will say this, if you can draft super heavy into this Watermark, I might run it. It's bad because if you're behind, it doesn't help you. If you draw this and you're about to lose the game, it's not going to save you. It's not going to stabilize the board. If your opponent's not close to being near 0 life points, then there's sometimes no point to playing this if the game's gone on too long and you're more worried about board state. There's a lot of reasons this is going to be a bad draw for you. But if you can draw this early, play it like turn 5 or 6, and then just continue to play Magic with a lot of these particular watermarks on your cards, you could find some value here over time, especially if you were in maybe a more aggro deck and you're trying to get those last few points of damage across later in the game. This is a way to do it. So I do like it in those builds. It's not for every build, definitely. But if you can go all in on watermarks and maybe aggro, yeah, I think it's runnable. Infinity Elemental. All right, here it is. The Mythic Vanilla that Mark Rosewater has been promising for a long time. And this one is something else. First off, casting cost is actually reasonable as long as you're comfortable with the red. 3 red. Maybe not for every deck build, but if you can swing that, yeah, run the creature, it's great. Infinity Power, 5 toughness. The awkward side of this is sometimes it just kind of 2 or 3 for 1s. Not that that's bad, but you do have a high casting cost here. So think of it this way. You pay 7 for this, and maybe an opponent just blocks with 3 2/2s that they paid 2 for. If that's the case, yes, you paid more mana than they paid, but you paid less cards than they paid. So you're still getting an advantage there, right? So think about the math there, and this card is good. This will be a very good card for you. Now, if that doesn't happen, and you can get this card across, you just win the game. So your opponent's in a weird spot, because yes, they would like to joint block and just kill this thing, but if they are not set up to do that at the given time, then they kind of are in a really bad spot, because they have to chump block. How many times have you been up against like the 7/7 creature and you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to take 7 this turn because next turn I'm going to play a 3/3 and then I'll have enough to joint block this thing and maybe stabilize? Well, this card takes that plan off the table. You can't do that. You can't just take the hit. You're going to have to block with that 2/2 and then you're that much farther behind. And eventually, if you don't have an answer for this, you're in trouble. So the card ultimately, I mean, sure, it can be hit by removal and such, but ultimately, it's a good card. Now, Infinity, it's going to cause some rules confusion, sure, right? And that's just the nature of these uncards sometimes. Technically, in regular Black Mortar Magic, there's no such thing as Infinity. Even if you have an infinite combo, you have to choose a number. So if I say, I'm going to gain infinite life, quote unquote, you actually have to say, I'm going to gain 1,000,000 life, for example. And then your opponent might have an infinite combo where they say, okay, I'm going to direct damage, hit you for 1,000,001. So that's why you have to have a number. You can't just be infinite. What infinite means for these purposes is basically it's truly infinite. If it hits the player, they're out, obviously. But beyond that, let's say I Swords of Plowshares this thing and I control it. Now I have infinite life, which means I can't lose to a life total situation anymore. I have to lose to being decked or something else, because that's just not an option anymore. Even if I get hit with someone else's Infinity Elemental, Infinity doesn't cancel out Infinity. I think the whole world just explodes. But if that were to happen, I'm still alive. That's the official ruling anyway by Mark Rosewater. So a lot of confusion that could come from this card, maybe some of the time if you're interacting with some black border cards for whatever reason. But I think within the set, there's nothing that's too crazy here. Just desserts. Good instant direct damage card for a creature. Can't hit a player. But basically, yes, it does pie damage, so for all practical purposes, this is 3. Party Crasher. This is interesting. I like the card. I kind of wish it untapped on opponents' untap steps. The best use I can think of for something like this is to just put this card out. I mean, first off, it is a 3/3 haste for 5. That's not bad for limited, just generally. Now, the fact that you can attack on an opponent's combat phase, which is really interesting, I don't know how great that is if the creature maybe attacked once already and then it can't untap unless you have a way to untap it, right? So it doesn't really do anything. Like, that ability doesn't do much. I would say in a multiplayer game, let's say you're playing a silver bordered variant of Commander or something like that, or maybe a multiplayer cube, that could be different because maybe there's one opponent you want to hold this back as a blocker for, and once that turn passes, then you might want to attack someone else with the card. So, like, there's some versatility there, but for the most part, it's just a fine curve filler, I think. Steen Floggerboss, okay, the one black bordered card in the actual proper set. And, yeah, this is a reprint from Future Sight. Future Sight, they created this card almost as kind of a joke in a way, saying, okay, let's just think of crazy things that don't mean anything, put it on a card, and maybe it happens in the future, right? Well, it's finally happened. It's been many years, but it's finally happened. So this was the inspiration for the contraptions, for the riggers, all of that. And we've seen a lot of riggers in other colors even. We're going to see a whole lot as we move forward today. So anytime you have a rigger, remember this card exists. And yeah, it might allow you to get a little more power on the battlefield if you happen to have this, and get you through your contraptions faster too. Feels pretty good. It's also a 3/3 for 4, which is nice as well. These cards will be found sometimes in your land spot. My assumption is that means 0 to 2 times in a booster box, considering it is a rare, but who knows, it might be a little different due to the way the sheets are printed in this particular set. It might be a little strange, but yeah, there it is. Steen Floggerboss. It's back. It actually has a purpose now. Steen Flogger of the month. Here is a Goblin Rigger, as a matter of fact, and this one's a 3/3 for 5, but when it enters battlefield, it assembles a contraption for each contraption you control. That feels pretty good to me. Even if I only have one contraption, I get a 3/3 and a contraption for 5. I think that's economical enough. If I have more, wonderful. There's even more economy behind the card. So, very good card just generally. And there are some great contraptions. And you have to remember, contraptions are kind of like a free roll anyway. Once you assemble the thing, every 3 turns, it just kind of happens. You don't have to pay mana for the ability. And that's a powerful thing. I mean, look at Planeswalkers. They give you an ability you don't have to pay any mana for. You pay sometimes in loyalty counters or what have you, but you're not using your main resource. That's why Planeswalkers are so good. I think contraptions could be quite strong. I'm really looking forward to playing with them. Steen Flogger Temp. Okay, here's another one. This one's a nice curve filler too for the 2 spot. You don't see a lot of 2/2s for 2 in this set. There's a lot of 2/1s. There are some. We'll see one later, but this one is going to be probably one of your 2 drops, so you'll be happy to use. And what I like about it is if I draw it later in the game, it's not a throwaway draw because it does have another ability, pay 6, tap, and it will assemble a contraption. It's also a rigger too, so keep that in mind. So yeah, overall, good card that can be used early, can be used later. You'll be happy to have this in your sealed or draft pool. Steen Floggery. Okay, here's another dice roll card. This one's an instance, so keep that in mind if you have to change Hammer Jammer on the fly. But anyway, this costs 6. It's a uncommon. Roll a 6-sided die. Assemble number of contraptions equal to the result. Okay, so here we go. Uncommon, so you're thinking, well, I don't expect huge power level here. And yeah, you're not getting huge power level here. If you roll 3, 4, 5, you're getting your money's worth and then some, I think. I think 3 is getting your money's worth for 6 mana. 1 and 2 is not. But if you hit a good contraption, maybe you don't care, right? So if you have great contraptions, this is probably very runnable. If you have reasons to roll die on other cards, this is very runnable. Maybe it doesn't always make your cut at 6 if those aren't the cases. Target Minotaur. I love this card. This is just awesome art and flavor. That's what really appeals to me about it. If you're not familiar with the joke, if you go through the history of Magic, a lot of the art, and especially the older cards, had Minotaurs just getting beat up all the time. They were always like the target of the instant or sorcery, stuff like that. So this card kind of plays off that fact a little bit, and it looks really awesome. Like, I just love the whole thing. The card itself is pretty good too for limited. 2-1 for 2. Like I said, there's not a lot of 2-2s in the set for 2, so this is kind of like your normal 2-2 for 2 in a limited set. 2-1 is just going to pass. And prowess, that's nice. Extra bonus on top, so I'm pretty happy to run this just generally too. 3-headed Goblin. This card's actually deceptively good. A 3-3 for 5 with triple strike. It's got regular strike, first strike, it's got last strike. What I like about the card is if it is not blocked, it's doing 9 damage to an opponent. That is huge, almost half their life total. So that is a big, big deal, especially if you can make it unblockable. And there are some cards we saw like in the Sneak faction a couple days ago that can do that very thing. So that would be kind of sweet if you can pull that off. Beyond that, though, the card is still good in combat because it has the first strike and regular strike, even though the last strike is just kind of a bonus thrown on there. It can do a lot of damage there too, but you really want to try to get this card across. It's very powerful for 5 mana. Work a double, okay, assemble some contraptions for 4 mana. This one's sorcery speed. The one we saw that was more high variance, of course, was at instant speed. So for the less variance, you're paying for it by it being a little slower. I think that's fine, though. Again, if you have good contraptions, very runnable. Wrench Rigger. This is kind of like your Steam Boss Flogger example card, I think, that they put in here. Just a 1-1 for 1. It itself is a rigger, so it would get the +1/+0 from Steam Flogger. And when this enters the battlefield, assemble a contraption. So, of course, again, if Flogger is in play, then you go ahead and get 2 of them. Pretty cool idea. Like, this is the example card, right? Like, this feels like this was the pitch card for how to make contraptions work, right? So, there you go. It's very runnable a lot of the time if, you have good contraptions. If you don't care as much about the contraptions you have in your pool, then maybe a pass. Ground Pounder. Really, as we move into green here, really, really good card. Here's a 2-2 for 2. Like I said, there's not a lot of them, but this is at common. You can pick them up in drafts. And again, another card that's really good later in the game. Nice mana sink. Keep in mind, it doesn't tap when you use that ability or anything like that, or you can use it more than once. So, yes, a green and 3. Roll a 6-sided die. Gets +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the result. That's actually pretty awesome. And if you get a 5 or higher, it will get trample. Yeah, so if I hit the 5, 7/7 trample creature, not bad at all. And like I said, maybe I hit like a 5 and a 2, right? Because I could, if I have 8 mana, I could keep pouring mana into this as a mana sink. That's actually pretty sweet. So yeah, the card's great early. It's great late. Fantastic, fantastic common, quite honestly. A very powerful common in the set. And again, there are things that manipulate die rolls as well. Keep that in mind. Joyride Rigger. Okay, another pretty simple card here. I mean, this is kind of like your Hill Giant Rigger, right? Like, it's a 3-3 for 4, and when it enters the battlefield, assemble a contraption. Okay, not a lot to say about it, but very economical. It's a fine card. Steam Flogger Service Rep. Okay, this is a way to get a payoff for goblins. There's not a lot of ways to do that in the set, and there's a fair amount of goblins. So this time, whenever another goblin enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1. If you do, assemble the contraption. On its own, this card's not very good. It's a 1-1 for 3. So if you don't have a lot of contraptions that you care about, or you don't have a lot of goblins, you're going to pass on this. But if you have those things, then it's very runnable. Cramped Bunker. Oh boy. Where do I start with this card? Okay, I'll try to explain it really quick. You put it on the battlefield, and then on each of your opponent's upkeep, they have to take one of their permanents and have it touching the card. The moment they can't have it touch the card without touching one of the other permanents, all their other permanents are destroyed. Okay, so the stuff that was touching the card gets saved, but everything else gets lost. It's a little slow. In a 1v1, I'll say this, it's a little slow, right? Like, you play this for 6, and then your opponent's going to be able to arrange the cards in such a way. It's going to be a while before anything happens, and it might be too late at that point. It doesn't really feel that great. Where this card shines, though, is going to be multiplayer. If you can play this in some sort of multiplayer format, then that gets interesting, because I could play this past the turn. If my opponent, my first opponent, wants to hit my next opponent, they could put their card like right across the whole thing if they wanted to, right? And then the next person is going to be stuck. So this adds a really weird level of complexity to a multiplayer situation. 1v1, I don't know. For 6, I'm not too scared of this card. If I see it hit the battlefield, I have plenty of time to work around it. Again, if I'm behind and I play this, I'm probably not saving myself or anything like that. So yeah, it kind of is what it is. It's a really unique card though, and I just love the idea. It's like a hot potato sort of in a way if you are playing with a multiplayer situation, but 1v1, I probably pass most of the time. Old Buzzbark. Okay, now this is a card, again, if we're talking about a silver bordered variant of Commander, could be a lot of fun because it does have a pretty big effect on the board. It's a 3/3 when it enters the battlefield, and depending on what you paid for X, you get to roll that many 6-sided die, but they do have to be held X inches above the battlefield, keep that in mind. And when you drop them, anything that touches your creature, that creature gets +1/+1 counters based on that number. Anything that touches someone else's creatures takes damage based on that number. So ultimately, worst case scenario, some of your creatures are probably getting at least slightly bigger. Worst case scenario. Best case scenario, some of your creatures are getting really big. Some of your other creatures, your opponent's creatures, are getting destroyed. Like, that could be awesome if it happens. Won't always happen, but there you go. The reason I thought this is cool in multiplayer is because you could, I don't know, you're more spread out. So you have a decision now to probably drop it on your stuff. It might impact the person next to you a little bit too. Maybe just drop it over someone else's stuff across the table. I don't know. It just gives you a lot of options. Now, the spike in me says, you know what? This is a 3/3 for 2. Just play a 3/3 for 2 on turn 2. You're playing sealed. You put this down, your opponent's going to be taking some damage, right? That's the first thing that comes to my mind for this card, which probably isn't the right place for an unset. But, you know, that's probably what I do with it. Krark's Other Thumb. Okay, I like this card a lot, actually, because it's really cheap. It's legendary. You can't stack these or anything, but that's okay. For 2 mana, if I have a lot of die roll going on, yeah, I'll run one of these and be happy with it. Whenever you roll a die, you instead roll 2 and then take the one you like better. All right, let's look at these contraptions. Okay, Boom Flinger. This one's a common, and whenever you crank it, you roll 2 6-sided die, and it will deal damage to a player based on the difference. So again, there are things that can manipulate that a little bit here and there, but for the most part, this only hits player, doesn't hit the creature. That's why it's a common. It's fine. Again, it's a free roll. That's the thing, and especially with some of the cards we saw yesterday in the League of Dastardly Doom, there's a little bit of a sub-theme anyway of a lot of small damage hitting the player, so this does play really well into that theme. Buzzbuggy. Okay, this time target creature gets +2/+0 and gains trample. Again, keeping in mind this doesn't have to be your creature. I mean, most of the time it probably will, but just keep that in mind. These contraptions are all very open-ended. Now, +2/+0, trample for a creature, and this is a common one, actually feels pretty good. There's times where you still won't have a profitable attack, and then it just kind of gets wasted, but yeah, you know what? Again, it's a free roll. It's definitely never going to be a bad thing for you. Gift Horse. This one's a rare. It's pretty good. It's a way to generate goblins. Again, some variants here. You have to roll 2 6-sided dice, take the difference. If you roll doubles, well, that's not cool. But even if you get 1, I feel like you're getting your money's worth here, because other than actually getting this on the battlefield, everything else, every time it triggers, is just a free effect every 3 turns. So free creatures just kind of out of nowhere, I'll take it any day of the week. If it's 1, wonderful. If it's 4, even better, right? Goblin Slingshot. Okay, this rare is pretty crazy. This time, all your creatures get +2/+0 and trample. This is a finisher at times, especially if you can go wide. We were talking about making goblin tokens and when that might be important. Well, if you have this card, that becomes very important, right? If you can go wide enough, like, this will simply close out a game. Really, really awesome contraption. Hard Hat Area. Out of all the mythics, this might be my least favorite. Like, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, it's a free roll. But whenever you crank this one, roll 2 6-sided dice, and then you'll assemble contraptions equal to the difference. I mean, assembling contraptions is good, don't get me wrong, but it feels like there's a lot of ways to do that, especially in these colors that we saw today. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm assembling more contraptions. At some point, I'll probably run out of contraptions, which again isn't a bad thing because you're getting a ton of free effects. But I don't know, like, for Mythic, it's okay. It's definitely good. Like, don't get me wrong, I'd play it. But I don't know, compared to some of the others that feel like they're like almost always good, this one is a little situational. Headbanger. This time, whenever you crank, target creature must be blocked this turn. So sometimes, again, relevant, sometimes not relevant. It will be good at times, other times it just won't matter. Targeting rockets. Kind of the same deal here, but maybe a little bit better, because this time target creature has to block this turn, so it's a different twist on it. Before, it's your creature must be blocked, so your opponent could just block it with a 1/1 or something. This time you're saying, hey opponent, that thing needs to block. that sets up better possibilities for you. So that's why this is an uncommon compared to the common. But again, not always going to be relevant. Thud for duds. Okay, here's another roll 2 6-sided dice. This time around, it deals damage to target creature equal to the difference. So a different take on the one we saw earlier that hits player. Again, difference between an uncommon and a common. Creature is sometimes a little better for an effect like this because it could be a lower number, but doing extra damage to a creature, maybe even like a creature that you imagine will be getting into combat, or maybe you're trying to keep out of combat or incentivize to stay out of combat. This could be a good way to kind of open up your turn. Turbo Thwacking Auto Hammer. Okay. This one is another kind of simple one. Target creature gains double strike, but that's very good, right? Because double strike is a good effect. If you're not in a offensive position, though, it's not going to be great for you. A lot of these kind of feel a little Win-More-ish to me in this particular faction, right? Like if you're in a stalemate, like board stall, wonderful. These will be very helpful. But some of the time they're going to be a little bit awkward. If you're behind, they're not helping you catch up necessarily. I mean, they're not hurting you. And again, they're free rolls, so like why not? But they're not maybe as strong as some of the other contraptions we've seen just generally. All right, with that being said, hey, that is Goblin Explosioneers. We're going to be back tomorrow with one more part. Crossbreed Labs will finish things up. Until next time, that way, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.